Hey, welcome back. Today, we're going to worry about the oiling system on this and get it all taken care of to avoid any future issues. Right off the bat, we got an oil pickup tube brace. What that does, provide even clamping pressure and hopefully guarantees we don't have any leaks or have to worry about any leaks developing over time. Now, for the oil pan over there, you can see I got it all cleaned up and powder coated. Now, just a short little preface. If you were to see how this oil pan was discovered for condition, you'd be shocked. So let me pull you back and show you. Yeah, you can kind of see by that it wasn't too good. Just get that out of there. Get that out. But now it's all cleaned up, with help of a steam jenny and an ultrasonic cleaner, and I'm confident she is pretty good. We got it all torn apart. We're going to do some mods in there. It's going to specifically apply to the Trailblazers with the V8s, 5.3, 6 liters, so this video is for you guys. Now, this will apply to other LS engines, but this video mainly concerns the Trailblazer chassis. So, let's get to it. Alright, so here we are at the bench. You can see we're starting on the bottom side of the pan, and one of the first mods we're going to do is this factory oil bypass. Here was the one that came out. Hopefully you can see it got a little squish coming out. And what this does is, if there's too much restriction going through the filter, this will actually open this little check valve and allow oil to bypass the filter completely and into the engine. And you're probably thinking, well, why delete this? Well, in the case of this pan, because you've seen how sludged up it was, I couldn't get that to clean. I couldn't guarantee it would seal. And frankly, if you do this type of work and you got the pan off and you're going through all this trouble, more than likely you're the type of person that's gonna change your oil when you're supposed to. So this is kind of null and void, and most oil filters actually have a bypass built into them anymore. It's kind of a redundant fail-safe for somebody that doesn't change your oil. It's a last-ditch effort to try to save an engine and keep the bearings lubricated. But in this case, well, we've seen how the old engine was treated, and it didn't really help. What we got is a solid plug. Now, I got this out of the freezer. She's still pretty cold, actually, which is good, and hopefully it'll help it slide in. Getting that out's pretty easy, I should say, before I start getting the old one out. You just want to tap it out with brass drift or something from the other side. They come out like that, so there's probably no reusing that when it comes out. But we're going to put this guy in, and all we're going to do, just come in, we're going to put a little oil on it, just to help slide in. Well, hammer I should say, but... And in like that, no trouble. And trust me, the freezer trick's great, because once that comes up to room temp, that's going to be hard to get back out. Now, we're going to put the oil filter adapter thread back on. And we're going to make sure we Loctite this. Definitely want to make sure you have Loctite on here. Is it super important? No, I guess, because you can always just pop it in if it comes out. But, hey, I'd rather make sure the threads are sealed good. We're not getting any oil slipping out of there. And when I change the filter, this preferably doesn't come out and make it a pain in the butt. Which, if you're curious what size for the hex, it's just a, let me double check, yeah, 1/2 inch. Had to double check, don't want to give wrong info. But just a 1/2 inch hex, and we're going to just tighten that up pretty good. So that part's out of the way. Now, let's flip this over. We're going to get our actual oil filter housing back on and over here and resealed, because that's important. And if you guys are worried about any of this, I'm going to scrape it off later and get it fully out, because this pan's still going to need a deep clean after some of the other mods. So we got this guy here. All he does is go back in like this. The hard part's going to be getting this gasket and this gasket back. But that's okay. Now, I'm not entirely sure, I will be honest, on this gasket, if it's the correct one. But this is the only gasket I can find for in here for that. So hopefully that'll work. Hopefully. And then you need part number for the actual filter housing gasket here. Be that. And this is probably one of those cases, a little bit of gasket shellac would help, but hey, you know, gonna do things the hard way. And for once I didn't struggle getting a gasket into place. For once. So let me go get a socket. We will tighten all this down. Nice and good. With that, our housing is back, sealed, and all good. And the reason I said before, I'm not sure if that was entirely correct for the gasket for this one. The old one that came out was a paper gasket. This one is an MLS, which hopefully it works fine in there, because I cannot find a paper gasket that works, at least for that. So now it's time to get these plugs back in. And these ports are for an oil cooler, which this one actually doesn't have. And you can see our hex for this is a 9/32, just in case you need it. But if you have an oil cooler, that would be where it would go. And these we want to Loctite. I'm using blue Loctite in case I want to take them out in the future. I don't see why I would at the moment. I don't plan on adding an oil cooler, but just in case, we'll use blue. And yes, I'm using copious amounts of thread lock just to help it seal. That is more than you're supposed to use, I know, but I want to make sure, because I do not want to get this in the chassis and find out that these bad boys ain't sealed, and I don't want them vibrating loose either. And technically they shouldn't leak on their own, because they are an MPT fitting. But we all know how that works out. A little sloppy in the threads, it seems a little tight, and then it don't seal. So we will get this cleaned up a little bit. This little baffle here is actually going to probably save this engine regardless then. Let me preface this, if you're unfamiliar with Trailblazer chassis, this portion is actually the front of the oil pan, towards the front of the chassis. This is the rear towards the transmission. And as you can see by the sump here, it's all in the front. And it tapers back towards the back. The issue is on acceleration, when this pan gets tilted up, all your oil actually flows away from the pickup, which, whoo, that's not a good thing. And this can actually cause a loss of oil pressure because it's picking up air. And this commonly causes rod knock on these engines. Mainly, I think it's rod 7 that encounters the first bit of starvation. Could be wrong on that. But regardless, this issue is one of the reasons a lot of the super sports and the Phi 3s have issues with rod knock. And why that is, well, right here, this tube that's cut out that goes through the oil pan, this is where the front diff bolts through. In GM's engineering, this was their best solution, I guess, for the chassis given the constraints to shove the V8 in here. I'm pretty sure the inline 6s that these come with do not face these issues. The diff bolts onto the side here. There's a half shaft that runs through to the other CV axle. The problem is, well, you can see, it just creates a very horrible sump location. If you're a two-wheel drive, you can actually swap to a C6 Corvette pan to avoid this issue. You'll just need the pan and the pickup tube. But if you want to keep all-wheel drive, if you're a super sport, or if you're four-wheel drive and you want to keep the four-wheel drive, you're stuck with this pan. So, there's a couple of ways to get around it. This baffle's one of the ways we're going to do it. This is a cheap baffle. I actually can get it from Kevin Hanson off the Trailblazer Super Sport forums. He's the one who came up with this. I think he charges $25 for the baffle with everything you need to put it in. All you gotta do is drop the oil pan. If you want a baffle, get a hold of this guy. I think this is probably the best solution there is when it comes to it works and economics. Now, PCM North Carolina makes a pickup relocation tube that moves the pickup tube to help avoid this issue. Now, I wasn't spending $300 some for the pickup tube. To me, it doesn't seem worth it, especially when the baffle's just such a cheap, elegant solution to this. It keeps the oil up front. Now, along with this, when we put this baffle in, we're still going to run the 7 quarts of oil. If you don't know, it's always recommended to run an extra quart of oil in these Trailblazer V8s just to help avoid this. You do not actually overfill where you're hitting into the windage tray and the rotating assembly by adding 7 quarts. 7 quarts is completely safe in these. Some call it Band-Aid fix. I call it good insurance. You can see with this baffle, all we got to do is put it in. We just drop it down in. And you can see I already pre-marked this one out. But the baffle sits in like so. And it's going to get riveted in on there. Probably looking at that, and you might be thinking, that seems like it's going to be a pain to mark and everything else. Actually, I think the easiest way to do it, take cardboard box in the case of the one the baffle came with, and all we're going to do is make a little template here, as you can see, that locates all of our holes and everything else. And if you notice, I cut the shape to the baffle ears. And when we put this baffle in, the ears stick out just enough. So you can hold that where you want it and bring this in, line it up with those baffle ears, and you got a perfect template to where you need to drill those holes. So you can drill the exact size holes and rivet this in exactly where you want. No loose sloppy holes or anything else. I will catch you after I get these holes drilled. So here we are before drilling. You can see I got a rag down in here to help catch any chips that fall down through. And I've actually put grease on both sides here, on the top and underneath. And the idea behind that is any chips will first get caught up in that grease, hopefully stick where it's a lot easier to clean. We're going to just drill nice, slow, good pressure with a sharp bit. Hopefully pull some nice long chips. Make it even easier. We don't want small chips, because that's going to be a pain. So let's see if this idea works. Yep, definitely seems like we're all good there. Now, just clean up those little bit of chips. So, as you can see, we now have our new baffle in here, nice and tight against that axle tube. What that's going to do is keep all the oil from flowing back here as fast, so hopefully that'll prevent any rod knock issues, especially being this is mainly a daily driver, not going to be drag racing this thing and everything else. For, I think it was 25 bucks. Well worth it for the added peace of mind. And now with this, all we gotta do, make sure the oil pan still fits, we'll be good to go. Which it looks like it fits now. Can't complain on that. I will check that pickup tube clearance afterwards off camera. And if you need to, just in case you run into the issue, you might have to bend your tube a little bit or not, depending on the way everything is. Now for me, this is an entirely different block, brand new oil pump. The only things that came off the old engine, this oil pan and the pickup tube. So hopefully I don't have to do any real modifying, but if I need to adjust that pickup height clearance, I can easily just grabbing a hold of that tube and giving her a little tweak whichever way I need. So, till next time.